We've talked a little bit about animation and GIFs and some of those things a little bit already. I want to play with some different techniques using Photoshop, actually working with some photographs instead of just doing everything hand-drawn. So I already have Photoshop open. I'm going to create a new document. I'm not going to make it super huge, right? Because I'm going to export this as a GIF, and super huge GIFs don't always function well. So I think 700 by 1000 is okay. I think it'll be alright. I don't think it's too large. So we have our canvas here. We're viewing at 66% because of the size of my current windows and all those things, right? So it's a little bit smaller than I'll actually export, but that's okay. So I've already looked around a little bit for some pictures. I've decided I want to work with sort of a beach scene, a fish, and a bird, and stuff like that. So I've gone to Unsplash, which is a place where you can use photos from for free, and they're often really high quality. So I've got this bird, and I've got this beach, and this fish, and this bird, and this bird. So I'm going to use this as the background, download it. I'm going to drag it to my desktop. And then from there, I'm going to drag it into Photoshop. Do I want it to be that big? Maybe around there. Maybe I like that better. Carve out some of the extra information that isn't necessarily important for my animation. I'm thinking about having the fish come in on this side, and then maybe the bird, and I want the fish to see the bird, and then to sort of panic a little bit. So I'm going to try to do all of this with just the images themselves, and not actually working at all with hand-drawn animation. I'm going to use some of the same ideas that are incorporated in it, though. So from there, let's bring the fish in. So I'll download the fish. I'm going to drag it to my desktop and open that with Photoshop as well. Okay, this one I did open with instead of dragging because I want to grab just the fish. I want to separate him from the background. And if I do it from the original image without scaling it down onto my canvas, that should be higher quality and it should make it easier to not get extra bits around the fish. I don't want a noticeable fringe. Now I'm not going to work super hard on this. I'm going to go kind of fast for the video and all. If I was doing this on my own, not for demonstration, then I'd probably spend a little more time trying to make sure that I don't get any extra bits I don't want. The quick selection tool worked pretty well in this actually, probably because the background is quite a bit different than the fish, right? It's both different by color and by value, right? And so that helps quite a bit. So since he's selected, I can do Command C for copy. Hop back over here, do Command V. We can see my fish is huge, so I'm going to zoom out a bit. And with my fish layer selected, I'm going to do Command T for transform, and let's try to scale him down a bit so it's a bit more realistic. Well, it's not going to be very realistic anyway, but at least it makes a little bit more sense for, ooh, okay, we're going to undo this. Let's say no. Okay, when I was doing Command T, I was holding down Shift to try to lock the proportions, but it wasn't locking the proportions for this one, it was actually unlocking. So just something to be aware of. Make sure that you are aware how your current version of Photoshop is behaving itself. How big do I want the fish? Maybe that big? I think that's good. Alright, now I can zoom back in. Okay, so first thing, maybe I want the fish to start here. I think that's good. I'm going to go ahead and actually start the animation already, even though I don't have all the elements in, and I think that's okay. So I've got my timeline up. If your timeline isn't visible, you can add it from here, right? I am going to do create frame animation. I'm not going to do the video timeline. We'll play with the video timeline later on. So I'm going to click create, and now I've got a cell, right? So right now I've got just these two things in it. That's all that I want. I can do a new frame, right? And then I could copy this layer and move it, right? So that way the fish starts to move into the frame, and I could make it not visible on one and make sure it is visible on the other. There we go, right? I can do that. That does work. and I can do that to have him move a little bit into the frame one by one. But actually, in Photoshop, we don't need to do that. I could actually just duplicate the layer, and I can move him over frame by frame, and it will actually remember that in Photoshop, right? If I modify the layer itself, like I actually erase part or paint over part, that will modify all of them, because then I'm actually modifying the bitmap layer itself. But if I'm just moving it, it's just repositioning it, and Photoshop will remember that. So there are some things that you can do that don't need duplicate layers. So maybe I don't want the rate to be the exact same for each one. Maybe I want him to ease into it a little bit, so I'm moving him a little bit more each of these frames by a little bit more too, right? So I'm not just moving him like 2 taps over on my keyboard. I'm moving him each time a little bit more. So that one was 5 times while holding shift, maybe 6 times, right? So that way he sort of accelerates. Alright, now the other thing that I could do too actually is we do have this option down here for tweening, but we'll talk about tweening later on. Okay, I don't want to spend too much time bringing the fish in because, I mean, you get the idea, right? Now I want to bring in the bird. So I was planning on making him start small and then get larger, but I don't know, I don't necessarily want to use the time right now. So I'm going to instead just start with this bird and then have the fish respawn to him. So click download, drag it to my desktop, open it with Photoshop. There we go. Now I can use the same tool here. Oops. Well, that's okay. Let's see in the little bits over here on the wingtips where that shift in value was. If I hold Option on the Mac, I can deselect an area or color an area to deselect the other way to try to get rid of some of the blue that I accidentally got with it. Something kind of like that. It doesn't have to be perfect, good enough just to get the idea across. Alright, so now I switch back to this one, Command V to paste. We can see my bird is huge, so I'm going to zoom out with Command minus. And then Command T to transform and shrink the bird down. Oops, I held shift again. Alright, not holding shift to keep the proportions constrained. And somewhere around there, let's see, is that a big enough bird? Maybe kind of, well, something like that. Zoom in to be able to work with it easier now. We can see the edges are not so great, right? This one is pretty decent, but this one not so great. And I'm not going to worry about that too much. We can see there's a little bit of issue with the tail too, but we're just playing with it right now to get the point across. Now, I'm going to start with the bird a little bit smaller and then get bigger, but I needed to start with the bigger one so that way it doesn't pixelate, right? If we take something small and make it bigger, then when it's adding the extra pixels to make it bigger, it's having to guess, right? So it's better to do the other direction. So I'm going to create a few frames here, and then I'm going to duplicate this one. Then I'm going to hop back one frame, duplicate my bird, and maybe make him a little bit smaller with the transform option. Hide the previous bird, go back a frame, hide the previous bird, duplicate the new bird, make him even smaller, hide the previous, hide both previous, duplicate the newest bird, and make him a little bit smaller again. Okay, I also need to get rid of the birds on the previous frames, right? So I'm going to select all of these frames by holding shift from this one all the way to the first one, and just hide the birds on all of them. Oops, what did I hide there? Oh, also, okay. So, fish comes in, and the bird pops in, and let's see. Get rid of our new birds across the previous ones, and there we go. Okay, and then I'm going to add another frame. I'm going to grab this picture, download, bring it there, open with Photoshop. All I want here actually is just the bird's head. This one will be kind of silly. Oh, a little more than I want, that's okay. Command C, go back over here. On this newest frame, frame 11, paste it in. Command T to transform it to the size that I want. I want it to kind of match the size there. Maybe a little bigger than the actual one is. Something like that. Then let's flip it. Alright, and this is why the fish will freak out, because all of a sudden the bird is looking at him with the open mouth. Command T to rotate. That looks a little bit better. Alright, now I'm just going to clean up the edges on it just a little bit. I'm not worrying about it too much, really. Okay, and then let's just do a soft round brush, no hardness. I can make it bigger using the right square bracket to kind of make it the edges soft to maybe sort of look like it's possibly blending in with the original bird. It's not going to look great, but that's okay because it's just sort of for entertainment purposes. Now that I've positioned it, maybe erase a bit more. And he doesn't match up very well, but that's okay. I could play with that more if I really wanted to. Now if I go to all these frames, we can see that bird head is across all of them. So just like before, I need to select all of them and hide the bird head. And now let's make the fish freak out. So here I'm going to duplicate this layer, because now I actually want to use some of the ideas of animation to make this fish a little bit more interesting. I'm going to warp transform it and pull some of this to be a bit bigger than normal. And then I think I want to do one more, and here I think I want to focus on just his facial features. So I'm going to erase pretty much all the rest. Rather roughly, but you could take the time to do it more accurately if you wanted to. Alright. And then now here that I've got that extra layer of just his facial features, I can warp them more specifically. Actually, I think I'm going to duplicate it to have one for just the eye and one for just the mouth. If I bring the fish back, and I've got the mouth here that we can't see, I can transform just the mouth. The free transform warp shape is looking a little strange because there's actually a bunch more of the fish off the edge that I didn't actually erase, but that's okay. And then I'll modify the eye as well. And if I go to these other frames, we can see that just like before, it's applied my new layers to all of them, and I don't want that. So I'm going to select all of them once again and hide my new fish layers. Maybe duplicate that one. There we go. So he expands, and then his eyes expand, and his mouth expands. And that is absolutely ridiculous, but you get the idea. It's a little too fast right now, but once again, keep in mind I could go in here and change these. I can also highlight all of them, just like I did with the other parts to hide and show, and change them all that way as well. And maybe I want that last one to be longer than the rest. Alright, there we go. So that's absolutely ridiculous and doesn't look amazing, but hopefully it gives you some more ideas of what we can do with some of these tools. And I'm going to use some of these techniques actually to help me animate better, including in hand-drawn, in an upcoming video.